it's Dan. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book To Escape the Stars by Robert Hoskins. It was released by Del Rey in 1978, and it's one of their typical short science fiction novels from the period. Now, I looked up Robert Hoskins online, and it turns out that he was mostly an editor for a magazine, I think it was called Infinity, which I do recall reading occasionally, and he only wrote a handful of novels. This is the third in a series called, I think, something like the Stars Sequence. Anyway, a little bit about the structure of the book. The book has three distinct parts. Each of these parts takes place on a separate planet, and they all have their own little story. And that's really kind of my big critical part about this book review. The problem with this book is that you begin in the first part having a plot develop and problems develop that you think are going to carry it through the rest of the book. But at a certain point something happens and all of that build-up is just kind of thrown away, and you find yourself walking through a stargate and ending up on another planet that has its own problems and issues. And then, so you think, okay, well then maybe this is going to be about this. This is what the story is about. But then at a certain point in the second part of the book, it's the same thing. It's as if God's come down and wiped everything away, and you find yourself on a third planet with a whole different set of problems. And then you think, well, maybe that's what the story is going to be about. But then the book just kind of ends, and it doesn't go anywhere. So I found that to be relatively frustrating in the arc of what a story is supposed to be. You know, I guess it is what it is. However, that's not to say that there was nothing about this book I didn't like. For example, I liked the theme, or one of the themes in the first part of the book. Remember, this book was written in 1978, at least that's when it was published. And during that time there was this big oil crisis. Everybody thought, oh, the world's running out of oil, there are big oil lines and whatnot. So the plot of the first part of the book revolves around that social problem of the time. Basically, they're going to another planet because that planet has oil, and they're going to ship it back to the Earth. So I kind of liked that aspect of it because I knew where they were coming from. The other thing I liked about it was that it really explored this idea of stargates. Now, stargates today, that's kind of an older concept. But back in the 70s, there were really only 3 or 4 authors that were exploring stargates. And when you go online, and if you go online and look at Robert Hoskins and To Escape the Stars and his other couple of books in this series, what you would find is people speculating that this book and a couple of other books were really the inspiration for the TV series in the 90s called Stargate, and also the movie called Stargate. So to find it being explored early on in this concept of stargates made it an interesting read for me. The other thing I liked about this book is it had the texture and feel of a 1970s science fiction novel, which is what I grew up on. So I really enjoyed going back into that type of an atmosphere and reading a story that's built on the same cultural and artistic cues that were used in the 70s. And what I mean is, like, and maybe it's easier to recognize it when you talk about movies, but if you were to watch a movie, for example, from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and somebody wasn't telling you what decade they were made in, you could probably recognize them. You could recognize them by the type of cameras that they were using, the way that they shot their scenes. You could recognize the acting styles that were consistent, because there seems to be this underwritten language that people adopt unconsciously based upon, you know, the larger society when they're doing a movie or when they're writing a novel. So being able to revisit that type of texture and feel in a 1970s science fiction novel, it was fun for me. I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. It was technically written fairly well, so it was very easy to read it. And I just blew through this book in maybe, 2 days? Like an hour or 2 at a time, so it was a very quick read. But really at the end of the day, it's that broken storyline in the 3 parts of the book which make me go, at the end of the book, why did I read it, type of thing. I think for most people I'd really only recommend it if you were interested in the Stargate That's traveling from one planet to another through a gate. If you're interested in that theory and kind of want to see where it came from, it's a good book to read. Or if you really want to just revisit the feel of a 1970s science fiction novel. But even then, I think because of how choppy the story is and the lack of feeling of satisfaction at the end of all three parts of this book, I think I'd really only recommend it to people that are really interested in recapturing that feel, and only because it's a really short book at 60,000 words or so. To Escape the Stars by Robert Hoskins, not the greatest novel ever written, not a whole lot of time investment, so if you have nothing else to do and you're kind of interested in those things I pointed out, it's worth to pick up. But otherwise, probably not. There's other books about Stargates that are a lot better written than this one. So that's all I have today. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you next time.